Okay, so I've been watching this unfolding Armageddon play out of these closures and quarantines, and it's gotten me thinking, like, are they really necessary? Okay, so coronavirus, first of all, had its beginnings, as did all of these recent diseases like H1N1 and SARS, had their beginnings in the abuse and ill treatment of animals. I mean, we should start with that before we talk about why the quarantine is a stupid idea. But if we look at SARS and we look at H1N1 flu and we look at COVID, Wuhan 19, we know that these diseases can be traced to animals who are kept in horrifying conditions and are treated inhumanely. So really man's industrial food production industry that has created kind of a reaction by nature, almost like a defensive reaction by animals to create diseases, to hurt man, to protect their lives. It's like nature's revenge, right? But that's the cause of corona. The question, though, is why are we quarantining people? So if we look at Wuhan, only about 100,000 people in Wuhan out of a population of 6 million got coronavirus, and only, I think, about less than 2% died. Most of those people were the older people and people who were weak physically. Both groups don't really add a lot to society, meaning they don't work, they're no longer productive members of society. So my question is, why not just allow the disease to take its course, which helps people to build a natural immunity faster, go on with daily business, because it doesn't infect everybody. It infects, based on the Wuhan model, it would probably infect between, 2 and 5% of the entire population, and of that, about 1% to 2% would die, maybe 3%. Okay, so why not just let the people who are going to get it and the people who are going to die, and have the economy open, have the economy going, and let people build natural immunity? I think that we're so obsessed with saving life that we overlook the fact that these quarantines could have a much more devastating effect economically than a few 100,000 to a few million people dead, as hard as that is for many people to swallow. We didn't have quarantines during the Spanish flu outbreak. I think 200,000 or 300,000 Americans died, but the disease, the virus passed. People went about their normal lives as much as they could without shutting down the entire economy. Given that like 40% of Americans, for example, don't even have $500 in the bank for an emergency, what happens if a national shutdown lasts for 3 months? What happens to the American economy? And do people start starving to death? Do you start to see social chaos, social unrest, breakdown of supply chains? So, in my opinion, I think that the Chinese method of this like dictatorial authoritarian quarantine is a super dangerous thing, because it is basically saying, hey, we're going to fight nature's natural rebalancing. And what nature is doing, by the way, with these diseases, what it has been doing for the last 10,000 years, is that it rebalances the population of the earth with pandemics, with diseases, taking out mostly the weaker and the older people, again, who aren't really productive members of society anyways. You don't have 80-year-olds running nuclear power plants. You don't have them working in factories. So why fight it? Why have a quarantine? It doesn't really make sense to me. The other issue, too, is, we're so obsessed with protecting human life. We have almost 7 billion people on this planet, if not more. If 5% of them died, that's just like a natural way to control this overpopulated planet that's creating a massive amount of pollution and garbage. So what if 5% of the planet dies? So what? People are the most renewable resource on the planet. You can make people in larger quantities faster than you can plant trees. Why have a quarantine? I think it's a stupid idea. Let everyone who's going to get infected. And again, it's not going to be everybody. The Wuhan virus was left unfettered to grow for almost 2 months, and only about 5%, only about 2% of the city got it. And again, only about 2 to 3% of those died. So I think the governments of the world, or the governments of the countries that are deciding to shut down their countries, are making a grave mistake. Because if this lasts for 2 or 3 months, what are they going to do to jumpstart their economies once the damage is done? What are they going to do with the people who run out of money for food? And that's going to happen in the U.S., in major cities in the U.S., very, very quickly. And that's why I think the quarantine is a mistake. I think it slows down the ability of the majority of the population to build an internal immunity, because you don't have the exposure to the virus at the rate that you need to. And it's going to have massive economic effects on the economy. So nobody's talking about this, but it's, in my opinion, it's a gigantic mistake. No quarantines. Isolation, obviously, for those who test positive. Get as many people tested as possible. But don't shut down the entire world just to save people from dying who are going to die anyways. So that's just the hard, brutal truth. And what happens next time? What happens if we have another pandemic next? We're going to shut down the global economy again next year for 3 months? I mean, we'll basically be reverting to the caveman times pretty soon. You cannot have a disruption, like a war, World War III-like disruption to international trade, without having gigantic consequences. And these idiots who are blaming Trump, or the socialists who are blaming us for not having a socialist healthcare system, well, the socialist healthcare system is not really working out well for the Italians, where the infection rates are gigantic. So it's not about a social or a private healthcare system. It's about taking steps and deciding, well, what's more important, the long-term economic health of the country, or saving the lives of a few 100,000 old people and people with immunity issues. That's why I think the quarantine is a really bad idea.